All right, so we're COMP1050 Animation 2D Tools, and it's week 4, and we're going to talk about a couple things just from an announcement perspective. I was going to give you your assignment this week for the 7th week, which is due, right? However, I'm going to wait one more week because I want to make sure that you guys have kind of a game framework to work with before I kind of hand out your assignment, right? It's going to involve a game. And I wanted to make it a very simple game that we're going to do, but we need a couple of weeks of how to structure a game framework, before we get to that. So this week we're going to be doing kind of a wrap up of Adobe Flash Classroom in a book kind of thing. This is the book that we've been using up till now, and I want to fold in all the rest of those lessons. There's 3 more lessons to go. Some things I'm going to show you it, and it's going to be like, and no pun intended, like a flash. We're going to see it, and then it's going to be gone. Yeah, I know. Ha ha. But the reason why is because we don't need that stuff, and it's out of scope, right? It's kind of cool stuff. We'll talk about it, and there's going to be less doing this lesson and more talking about stuff because I want to kind of go over the things that Flash can do for us. And I've created these 3 parts of these lessons, starting with this part here, just so you have a reference card, just if in case you need to do something like this in a job. Like, so let's say, for example, tomorrow you're in a co-op and they're asking you to do a movie or some kind of import or whatever. I want to include the details how to do it here, but we're not really good. It's out of scope for us. So we're going to kind of talk about things that are a little bit out of scope, and then, but they're going to be there. We might try a couple things, and then we'll get to doing a little bit of classes in Actionscript today. Okay. So let's talk about, I want to talk about classes first, actually, before we get into it. So up until now, when we were on the timeline, and if I open up a new Actionscript file here, right, and if I can get one of you guys to grab the door, so that way there's not so much noise on the video. So I've got this new blank Actionscript document. So join me here on this one. So I've got this new blank Actionscript document, and so far we've been doing these things here on the stage. So an example would be if I create, like I said to you before, I create something like a rectangle shape. So here I've got a rectangle shape, simple shape. It's black. It has no stroke. And let's say if I want to change the rectangle, I double click on it, and I want to change this shape. So let's make it something like a more appealing color. I don't know. Maybe we'll make it a gray color, a little bit nicer, instead of just a straight black. So it's a black or a gray triangle with no stroke, rectangle. Double click. If I want to add a stroke, I can't do it at this point because I haven't had a stroke kind of put together right now. I right click onto it. I create it as I convert it to symbol. So here I'm creating a symbol for the first time, and I'm going to call it my rectangle. Or let's just call it rectangle 1 or whatever. Rectangle. There we go. If I can spell. Yay. So if you notice when we're creating the movie clip, it's a movie clip symbol, and the rectangle itself has a registration point of the top left corner. Here's the top left corner. And I press OK. Rectangle. If I look at my library, here it is, rectangle. And it actually gives me a preview of what it looks like. Right? If I want to bring this to the stage, there's a couple ways I can do this thing. So I can delete this now. And here I have my layer. Here's my layer. I want to create an actions layer. So I right click on on the actual layer that I'm on, and I can insert another layer, and I can call this layer actions. Maybe what I want to put in on this layer here is maybe like, my background layer. I don't have a background right now, but I'll call it BG for now. So I've got an actions layer, and my actions layer normally would house all your Actionscript stuff, right? It's on the timeline. So this is what we typically would do. We go into actions, right? I'm on the actions layer, by the way. I'm click onto it, right? If you're on the other layer and you're clicking the actions layer, it'll just appear there. But I want to go to actions. How I got this button, by the way, see the button here on the screen? I got it by going to Window, Actions. And when I do that, it pulls up this window. And all I've done is I've dragged this panel so that it connects to my my button right here, or my panel right here, right? And this other toolbar. So that way it's always available to me. Because I really hate going to Windows Actions to pull up my Actions panel. I think it sucks, right? So I got this little button. So let's go back. I'm in Actions, and I'm going to start typing. So what do I want to do? Well, I've got my rectangle, okay? But there's a couple things I'm missing right now. Even though I've got my rectangle, I can't do anything. I can't bring it on the screen or anything like that until I go to my library, and here's my movie clip. Take a look at my movie clip. Here's rectangle, right? I right-click, and I click on Properties. In the Properties, when I was creating this movie clip, it asked me, do I want to export this thing for Actionscript? I'm going to say yes. Click on this. For me to do that, it's going to create a class. Now, it's calling it rectangle, but maybe rectangle is a taken name, right? So just to be safe with me, I'm going to call it like, rectangle, and in the end, I'll put an MC. Rectangle MC, capital M, capital C, just so that I know it's my movie clip version of the rectangle and it's not somebody else's, right? And then I'm going to press OK. It's going to actually, Flash is going to come up and say, hey, a definition of this class cannot be found. We're going to create it for you. I say OK. So I've got my class definition for rectangle. There it is. Right? So I got rectangle MC. Now that I've done that, I can create an instance of this class of rectangle. How do I do that? I go to my Actionscript and I start typing var, just like we did in our JavaScript before. Var defines a variable, right? It's a variable definition, and I'm going to call this thing. My rectangle. My rectangle colon. When I press the colon, it's going to give me code hinting is going to come up and it's going to say, hey, what kind of object you want to create? Well, I know it's a movie clip, so I kind of start typing a few words of movie clip, and I click onto it. Well, guess what? As soon as I do that, Flash pulls up this import definition. It says import flash.display.movieclip. It kind of adds that in automatically. If I just leave it there, nothing still is happening. All I'm doing is defining my rectangle as a movie clip. But I want to make it equal to a new rectangle MC, which is what I've defined. It's a new rectangle MC. It's an object that I've already defined that's in my library, right? That's the first thing I want to do. Next, I've got my rectangle, but I want to kind of define coordinates for it. So I want to say my rectangle X, let's say I'm going to put it at 150 pixels, and my rectangle Y, if I can actually spell, put rectangle one way and the other way. I'm going to correct that. It's just typing errors. My rectangle X and my rectangle Y, I'm going to put it at 150 and 150. Okay? And then I need to add child, because remember, I want to put the rectangle on the screen. So I got to do add lowercase a, child, capital C, right? In brackets, my rectangle, right? Add child, my rectangle. So let's try that. So I'm going to play my movie clip. So command return or command enter. And when I do that, I got this funky rectangle, right? Now if you notice, look, there is no rectangle on my stage right now. In fact, I've got nothing on my stage whatsoever. Everything I've done is by creating an instance of the object that I defined in my library, right? It's called my rectangle. But my rectangle doesn't do anything right now. And if I want it to be clickable, as an example, I can make it clickable. So let's say I'm going to create an event listener. I start with the object that I want to create my event listener on, which is my rectangle. So my rectangle dot add event listener. Here it is. Code hinting comes up and allows me to do this kind of thing. And what kind of event do I want? I want a mouse event. And I want a mouse event.click, which is the perfect event listener, right? Mouse event.click. Let me just hide this stuff here so you can see it better. Comma. And then I want some kind of function, right? So I want to call it maybe mouse click event. I can call it whatever I want. Okay, so that's one part of my event listener. And now I want to create my other part of my event listener. And it's going to be called mouse function, mouse click event. In brackets, I want to define an event variable that's going to hold my event itself. And I want to make it of type mouse event. Right? So I'm actually calling with a mouse event class. to finish off my function, I've got to declare what my function returns, which is void. Here it is. Now I want to add in my my curly braces, and this is where I put my mouse click event. So what do I want this mouse click event? So I click on the mouse. What do I want it to do? Well, maybe I want to change the color properties of the rectangle. So maybe I want to say my rectangle dot if I can go color, right? And I can. It'll allow me everything that I can do with my rectangle, right? It'll allow me right here. If I want to change the color, the height, the area, all this kind of stuff, I want to move it around. Everything that it allows me to do, I can pretty much do right here, right? In fact, if you don't know what properties you want to do, this is why we've learned Flash in the first place. If I double-click my rectangle, put it on the stage, and then I click onto it and go to Properties, it'll tell me a couple things, right? This is my fill color, right? Here is my location. Right now, I'm at 75, and so my height is 75.95, or my width is 75.95, and my height is 55. So what if I want to change my height and width? Well, I can do that. So I'll change my height and width to 100 by 100, just because to make a change. So go back. So go back to scene 1. Go back to my action script, and in here, maybe what I want to put is height, right? Here's my height. Height is equal to 100, and my rectangle, I only have to click on this once though, width, right, is equal to 100. These are things that I can do, no problem. Oops, didn't mean to say it. All right, let's run it. So here it is. I'm running it. I click onto it. Boom, it grows, right? So I've done that. It works. It grows, right? Other things I can do. Maybe when I click onto it, it changes position and goes from 150 to 150, right? My rectangle is going to change its x-coordinate plus equals to, we'll add another 100 to it. So make it move to the right, and my rectangle dot y plus equals to 100. So make it move to the right and down. All right, so we got a couple things that it'll do. Let's try it. So run the movie, click onto it, and boom, it moves to the right. Okay? So it does a couple things. Our rectangle has done something. We've created a movie, and we've done this all in the timeline. But you know what? As we get to do this crazy stuff with games and stuff we're gonna enter into over the next couple weeks, it's better off for us to have a separate document that we work on, right? Because this is really inefficient for me to write it in the timeline. If I write something in the timeline, and we can test stuff in the timeline, and we'll do that next week. But for me to write stuff on the timeline, it's really ugly, right? It's like stupidly ugly. And we can't do much about it. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to create a class. This is the first time we're doing this. So for those of you who remember how to do classes, we're going to create something here that is a separate document that we're going to refer to. Where we do that is once we've created our stage, here's our stage, here's our class, document class right here. We actually write this in. So let's say I'm going to call this my rectangle. That's what I'm going to call my class. Here's my rectangle, right? If I click on this edit class definition, right, it says, hey, there is no such thing as my rectangle. Do you want to create it? I say yes. Now, when I do that, I click onto it, it says two things to me. Do you want to open up in Flash Professional or Flash Builder? Well, guess what, guys? Unfortunately, in front of you, on the Macs here in the lab, there is no Flash Builder. There just isn't. It's actually a way better interface. But for now, we can do it in Flash Professional, which is totally cool. On the PC, there's something called Flash Develop that you can download, and it's a kind of a free and open source tool to develop our games as well. I'll be using Flash Professional for most of this course, but then there'll be times where I switch to Flash Builder when I need to. So I'm going to open it up. So here is another document that's inside, kind of in the same, another tab. Here's my stage and my file that I have already, right? And here's this other document that that's called Script 1, right? And I haven't saved anything yet, and I have to. And if you notice, there's a couple things. I have something called a package definition, right? Who remembers packages from Java? If you guys have taken Java, it's kind of the same thing. It gives you the ability to layer or to nest your documents inside different folders, right? So your folder is your package. So let's say, for example, I would do a reverse kind of a URL, and usually that's how we do it. We go like com dot, I don't know, Georgian College dot my app, whatever my app is. So com is the first level of directory or folder, right? Georgian College would be the one folder nested into it, and nested in that would be your app, whatever the app is called. Why? Because you can have more than one app, right, that's in the same package, if you will. For now, we can just leave it as package, and that'll go to the top layer where everything is stored all in the same place. So a couple of things that happen. Flash automatically knows that we need a movie clip in here. So it's actually said flash.display.movieclip. Why? Because we already had a rectangle that I defined, if you remember, called myRectangle. Take a look. In the library, I have this other movie clip called rectangle, and I have this linkage to rectangle MC, right? Here it is. Let me just pull it up for you. Here it is. If I go rectangle MC, and if I want to look at that, here's script 2. Rectangle MC extends movie clip. Right? I don't have to do anything there. Right? What I really want is this one here, this script 1, my rectangle, and it's going to extend movie clip. Remember, from any class definition, there's two things. We have to declare the class, right? So I have to say public class or private class, right? In this case, it's a public class. I've imported my flash.display.movieclip library here, and the name of my class is called myRectangle. Extends means it's a subclass of the movieclip class. The movieclip class belongs to Flash. It's embedded into the Flash library, right? I've imported it here, right? So this movieclip, this class I'm making is a subclass of the movieclip class itself. If you notice, I have another function that's inside my class called the same name as the class. What would that be? Typically, anybody? My constructor, right? So this is the constructor. If this constructor code, and it actually says it there, if this is the one that, if this fires every time I call upon my rectangle, the class called my rectangle. So as soon as my movie clip is loaded and I run my Flash file, this thing fires. My rectangle fires. Now, this is all cool. This is all fun and games, right? But I need to include some of this other stuff if I want to take this off the timeline. So what I need to do is grab this mouse event, because I know I'm going to need a mouse event. I've already got the movie clip, right? But I got to grab this mouse event first. I'm going to copy the mouse event and put it into my external file here. Okay, so there's my mouse event. And then I'm going to grab the rest of this stuff, my var, all this stuff, and I'm going to pull all this stuff for now. I'm going to cut it out. I'm going to go to my external file here, and I'm going to copy it in here. Okay. There I am. So I've got this constructor, and inside here I'm defining a variable, all right, called, and unfortunately it's called myRectangle, and that's not going to work anymore because I have a class. My class is called myRectangle, so I better call it something else, right? Maybe I should call it Rectangle1. Rectangle1. Rectangle1 is a movie clip, and Rectangle1 is the one that I'm going to add in here, right, as an example. And I better take Rectangle1 and put it in these positions as well. So this is all good, fine and good now. One thing is, even though I've got my constructor, I don't need to put this function inside of it. So I can take this function out of it. And I can put it outside of my constructor down here in the class. So now it's a method, right? Remember, anything that's in the class itself is a method. And this is what it looks like. Okay, so I've got my import statements in the top. I'll kind of put that in there for you guys. Import statements. right? Here's my class definition itself. Class definition, right? Here's my constructor. Okay, so I've got that in there as well. Let's take some spaces out of here. And then I've created my event listener for rectangle 1, event listener. And then here's my event listener methods. So that's what I've got here. So I've got this external document now. Now I'm going to save it. File, save. And it's going to say, hey, where do you want this thing? I'm going to put it on my desktop for now. And I'm going to call it myrectangle.as. I should probably save my file as well. I'm going to call it file, save as. I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it myrectangle.fla. Save. Okay, but myrectangle.fla, guys, there's nothing in it, right? I got to get rid of this stuff because I don't need this anymore, right? And now, take a look what I have. All I have is a library item, right? Here's my library called with a rectangle in it, right? But when I run it, right, it's going to start giving me all kinds of errors. Why? Let's take a look. It says, and this is where the errors come up. Thomas, desktop, my rectangle, line 15, access possibly undefined property X through a reference with static type class. Let's take a look at that. So I go here to my rectangle.as, right? And what's happening is I've talked about my rectangle, and that's not what it should be. It should be rectangle 1. I made an error because I didn't convert it properly. It's my fault. There it is, X and Y. That's taken care of. Now I'm going to save. Okay, now I'm going to run it again. All right, some other errors we're going to go through. Let's swim through these things. Implicit coercion of a value of type class to an unrelated type flash display object. Okay. Oops. We're going to find out all our errors now. Okay, here it is. And here's another problem. I'm adding child to something, but I'm not adding child to anything that's around. I have to give a specific instance of what I'm adding the child to. Well, guess what? I'm adding the child to the stage. So I got to put that in there too. Stage.addChild. All right. Save. Go back. Launch it. Okay. 2 more. It says, line 29, access of undefined property rectangle 1. 29, 30, 32, and 33. All right, let's go back. Line 29. All right. Just a moment. Here, I've got my variable, correct. I've got my variable inside my constructor, right? And this is a bad place for it to be. It's got to be here at the class level, or else my other methods won't know anything about it. So these things here, this var rectangle, has got to be defined as a class level variable up here, right? Class level variable, or instance variables, if you will. All right, whoops. Just wanted to get rid of these lines. That's good enough. Let's try that now. Aha. So now we've got a rectangle. So if I click on it, it grows and it moves to the right. And it's all done outside of my file. So take a look again. What do I have in my timeline? Nothing. Even my actions layer is useless. Everything in the timeline is useless. The only thing I need is my library. for this file. Okay? So the library that you're going to have when we do game programming coming up next week, that's going to be where we store all of our assets, our sounds, our graphics, everything else. In fact, you don't even need that. We don't even need that. For now, we're gonna kind of stick to that from a level of comfort, just because we need it for now. But in the future, we can even load stuff outside of our library as assets that we're going to load in, right? So all I've done is created an instance of a rectangle, and again, I'm running it through this external file called myrectangle.as. Here it is, and if you notice, I'm just going to skip down here. It's an external document that has a couple of import statements, a class definition, myRectangle, which extends subclass of movie clip. Inside there I have a class level definition of my rectangle, which is the object, an instance of the object which I've defined in my library, rectangle MC, rectangle movie clip, that's what MC stands for, that I've defined. You can define it as anything you like, right? My constructor, and inside my constructor I've initialized the x and y values of my object, the instance of the object, and instead of just putting add child, because my Actionscript doesn't know what I'm talking about, I've got to provide some kind of context to it. So I've got to give it where I'm adding the child. I'm adding the child to the stage, so I got to put stage.addChild. And then I created an event listener here, and the actual method here, what actually moves the the actual the object around. Very, very simple example. So I did this exercise before I started this course. I said, you know what? I want to create this, kind of ugly tank. And if you remember from before, if you're with me in when we did Python, I went to this. We went to this website with this place called Reiners Tilesets. Who remembers that? We kind of did it in Python, right? So Reiner has this really cool, like this guy, he's got some really cool assets here, right? He's got some 2D graphics that you can grab, like for animals and buildings and environment and monsters and humans and vehicles. So here's 2D vehicles. And I kind of like this tank. And I said, well, you know what? I want my tank. I want to make a tank game. And I kind of did this, on my own. I did it the hard way. Okay, and we'll talk about what the hard way and the easy way is. So I downloaded all the images, and there's a bunch of images, 32, the tank in 32 directions, right? And I kind of put it in this file called tank. Right? The tank has a bunch of stuff. I've created assets, for the body, for the bullet, for the cannon, different sounds that I've got in here for my tank. So I've got a tank engine sound and a tank fire sound. Some images for the tank, and I did one image for every direction. Take a look. Woo! I didn't have to. I could have used Flash animation to do it all, right? And made a rotation. But I decided to do it this way. I could have used a sprite sheet too, but I didn't use a sprite sheet. I just used individual images, okay, from Reiners Tilesets. So this is your challenge for next week, because we're going to get together. You guys have some experience with programming. Try and do something like this. So here's my tank AS game, right? My tank FLA. And we're just going to kill this for a second. Let me get back to this in a second. Here's my flash file. I'm going to kill my rectangle and my rectangle.fla. And if you notice, my tank FLA has nothing in it. It has a tank layer. That's it. But I got a bunch of assets. I've got a body for the tank. Here it is. I've got my bullet, which is a circle. Right? I could have made it anything I wanted. I just made it really simple. My cannon, right? Which includes it's actually has two layers. It has a shadow and an the upper tank itself. And if you notice, I labeled it with some labels. I labeled it east, north. Here's north, right? Here's west, and here's south. And what I can do is I can go to each of these layers, right? Because I can create as many complex objects as I want here. And I've created a nested timeline for this object. This is just one part of my tank, right? My cannon. And here's my body, and my body has also two layers. It has my labels for south, west, north, and east. That's what it has, right? And in my action script, there's nothing. I have no action script for this thing here. It's inside its own file, right? And if I show you, it's under this class file called tank. I'm going to open up in Flash Professional, and here it is. I got a bunch of imports that I did, and I declared all my objects. I declared my class variables. Here they are, right? Sounds and so on. I want you to try this out, guys. See if you can create a simple little thing for yourself here. I also created an event listener on the stage that if I click the I listen for some key downs, right? And what I'm listening for is any kind of movement, right? So I've created my event for my keyboard events, and I created a keyboard up, a keyboard down, just like we did in old Python, right? Keyboard down event, space event, so on. And I used calc vector, the exact same function that we used in pretty much in Python, to create the same stuff, the same calculation of the vector and the angle that the tank was moving. Now, there could have been different things, different ways I did this, and by doing this, I learned a little bit more about Actionscript, right? But I encourage you guys to do this for yourself. Try and make a little tank or some kind of object that moves across the stage, right? Okay, let's see how this thing works. So I'm going to run it, and here I have my tank, right? Now I have two things I can do. I can move my body with my arrows, and my C, and I believe my Z and my C keys move the turret. I can do that all together. So here's my body, so I can move, right? I can aim my turret and fire, right? Now there's some issues that I figured out. That bullet comes from the center of my tank, which is something I don't want, right? I don't have to make it come out like that, right? I can make it come out of the muzzle, right? And I've got to be smart. Maybe I need to make my bullet layered inside the muzzle of my gun, right? And a small animation of the bullet itself coming out of the muzzle, right? So again, it's just the way you think about things. It's all conceptualizing how we do these things, okay? But the actual bullet and the tank moves. Now I tried to add in a soundtrack, but the problem was the way I had added in before, it created continuous sound, and I didn't like the way it was working. But you could put a soundtrack in the background. But the tank itself will move across the stage. There are no boundaries, so it'll go beyond the stage itself, right? And the reason why it looks realistic and it has proper lighting effects is because I've used 32 images for each of the body and the turret. Also, I don't like the shadow. The shadow isn't right. The shadow looks like the turret is floating. It's almost like the turret's a separate entity altogether, which is also something I probably would have changed. I probably would have made the shadow appear underneath the tank, right, as opposed to on top of the tank the way it is. So a couple of learnings. I recommend you try it out for yourself. This is running right off of Flash, an Actionscript file. It has nothing to do with Flash animation itself, other than activating certain layers. What I will do, if you're interested, is I will share this ugly file with you guys to see what I've done, right? Other things to try before we go on for today with the real stuff for today is, I'm just going to save this stuff and get out of it. Other things to really try out is try out some of these templates that are built into Flash, just to play around. Okay, so if I go to More, Flash has some simple files that you can go to. For example, it has a date countdown sample. So if I open that up and I run it, it has some different dates and everything else that'll run. You have to look at you would have to look at the action script that's embedded in this thing. Let me just go through that, and you can see that there's a little bit of action script here that should be working, right? And there's for some reason or another, it's all there for you, but it doesn't work. So why isn't it working? Try and figure out why this doesn't work. It's a sample that they've given us for it to work out for us. Right, here it is. So Danek. And it says fonts should be embedded for text that may be edited at runtime. We didn't embed any text, and that's probably what's happening here. The other thing you want to try is this. One really cool option here. If you go to More, and if you go to Simple Files, there's something called RPG Game Collisions. It's built in, right? And it kind of gives us this little game, the sample game, right? So here it is, right? You've got this stage, which is defined as 320 by 480, so the size of an iPhone, as an example. And then these little buttons here that allow us to move our man around, right? We also have something called like a fog of war, right? And if I go to the ActionScript layer, there's quite a bit of ActionScript embedded in different things. Part of it is inside the symbol definitions themselves, and part of it is on the stage. So here we have the stage itself with a bunch of different mouse events. So here's your key up and key down, and so on, different kinds of events, right? Different buttons and how to set them up and move. And we also have the fog of war moving around when we move our guy around, right? Each of the items in the library, for example, we have something called fog, right? This is our item in the library here, right? And let me just go back. Here's the fog of war. This is what it looks like, right? And this is our symbol for the fog. And it also has other symbols, like for gold. Here's our gold symbol. And it has, each of these symbols have their own timeline and even some ActionScript around them. So if I go to the ActionScript for the gold, this is the, for each of these things here, I can look at ActionScript for the walls, for the bowl, for the silver. They're all broken up over like every movie clip. Maybe good, maybe not so good. Right? Imagine trying to track down a problem across every symbol. It's bad, right? So not really the recommended way to do it, but sometimes it solved some problems for us to embed the ActionScript within our movie symbols as well. All right, how does this thing work? I'm just going to go back to scene. So there's nothing on the stage except for this. So this all is on the stage here. Everything has been put on the stage for us as a starting point. I run it, and there we go. I've got fog of war, and as I scroll through, the fog of war goes with me. It stops me. It doesn't allow me to go through the walls, right? It doesn't make any noise or anything like that. I can get the Flame of Thanatos. There we go. I just got a special magic item. And I can kind of collect my gold, right? And this stuff is all built into Flash. Like I said, this little example. So it's a good little piece of learning for you guys, right? From a basic game perspective, right? Now, is this exportable to HTML5? No, because there's some issues, right? You'd have to, when you export something for HTML5 using our create.js, what you need to do is you have to rewrite some of this ActionScript into JavaScript, right? So there's some issues around it. And we're going to learn how to do that at some point. This also doesn't use any kind of physics engine. You don't have any sounds built in. It's almost like a shell of a program, right? But again, for me, it's a little bit, there's some learnings involved because you've got like some money, you've got artifacts, and you've got like some output here for your character. Okay, so I would encourage you to take a look at some of this stuff as we go into more and more game development. Right? One more. Another thing to really look at is if you want to look at things like if you're interested in inverse kinematics. We talked about inverse kinematics a bit with the we did the crane, that example. Well, they have an inverse kinematics man here. Let's take a look at that. So here he is, and if I run the code, you can see him. He's got his kind of walk cycle, and it's been done with IK bones, and it'll keep going over and over again. Well, the great thing is with the inverse kinematics, here I'm going to go back to the beginning. I can pose this guy any way I want, right? Remember how this works. I can kind of pose him so that his foot is put into a weird position. Here, let's put him over here. So he's going to hop when he kind of starts off. There we go. Hop, hop, hop. Right? He's going to keep going. And you can continue this walk cycle as far as you want. But at the end of the day, the great thing to look at this is if you want to create a character like this and you want to do it all within ActionScript, you can do the same thing. All we're doing is we're animating using IK bones that are built into this symbol, if you will, and running the timeline. So let's say, for example, you make a hero and you want to have a walk cycle with bones. You can do it. You can make it look very realistic, and you create the symbol here in Flash, and then you call upon it with Actionscript. You make an instance of the symbol on the stage. Anyways, just some stuff that I encourage you to take a look at as we move into the second half of the course next week. Okay? And when I mean second half, like we did today, again, we're going to finish off Classroom in a Book, and that will be it. And then next week, we're going to start off with all the interesting stuff. So I encourage you to explore and try this out. But my challenge to you personally, for those of you who are good with high challenges, is pick up a simple vehicle and make it move around the stage. Do it in an external class document file with ActionScript, with nothing else on the stage at all. Just define some symbols there. You can do it by using Reiners Tilesets or using a sprite sheet. You get used to doing that now. And as we get forward, when we start talking game elements in Flash, it'll be very comfortable for you. And one more thing, we are going to probably use Starling, which is a Flash library, if you will, for game development that has its own game engine and everything else built in. We're going to get into that. And I've included, there's a free Starling book that you can download from O'Reilly Media, right? You can actually download the book. It's a good source book. It's a PDF, and it's been written by the guys who made Starling. And they talk about this Starling framework that people have been using these days like crazy to create games and also user interfaces. Okay, I'm going to pause here and then go on to the real work.